I remember growing up and seeing my mother and her friends in the bathroom using a needle, and I remember telling myself, like, I will never do that.
It was a scene played out too often in Maegan Burks' childhood in Tennessee. Her parents strung out on drugs and alcohol.
I felt unwanted, not good enough. Like, what's wrong with me? Why do they not love me, but they love drugs more than me?
She lived with her grandparents, and though they took her to church regularly, Maegan struggled to see the point of it all.
I did not think God was even there. It was irrelevant. Like, go to church to go to church. Just what you're supposed to do.
So Maegan looked elsewhere to fill the needs of her heart.
First time I got high with my mom, I was probably 17 and pregnant. I was pregnant with my daughter. We were smoking marijuana together, and it just kind of numbed. It numbed me.
By the time Maegan was 18, she had a daughter, Elena, and was one step away from a full-blown drug addiction.
So I started taking nerve pills, started doing Xanax.
Then, one day, when she went to visit her mother, she did something she swore she'd never do.
She was shooting up morphine, and I remember taking that first shot. In my head, it almost made sense of why my mom and everybody was doing drugs that way. As I got more attention from men, the more drugs I wanted to use, because it was to fit in.
Over the next couple of years, Maegan would have another child, a son, Sebastian, all while continuing to use. Then her older sister suddenly passed away, driving Maegan further into the pit of addiction. She says there were times she slept with men, even women, just to get her next fix.
I felt so much guilt, shame. I was a terrible person, and that's what I felt like inside. Like, you can't get any lower than this.
Then in February 2011, at 22 years old, Maegan was arrested and charged with 3 felonies for robbing a pharmacy with some friends. By then, she was still living with her grandparents who were raising her 2 children. So when she called her grandfather to post bail, he came and took her home. But even seeing the disappointment in his eyes wasn't enough to get her to change.
Instead of wanting to do something different, I went and stole his checkbook and did like a 3-week binger. When I got home after my binger and he found out that I had stole his checkbook and wrote some checks, he kicked me out. The disappointment in my papa's eyes crushed me because he had been my person. And when he looked me in the face and said, I can't let you come back in this house, that I was like, man, I've got to do something different.
With no other options and nowhere to go, Maegan decided to enter a faith-based drug rehab program at the Russellville Dream Center in Alabama, far from the temptations at home. Now alone and denied contact with her grandfather, family, and children, she had to have a hard conversation with herself.
I had to admit out loud to myself, I was a whore. And I didn't care who I slept with. I didn't care what I had to do with them to get my next fix, but I was gonna do it. I had been praying, like, God, like, how can you forgive me for that? Like, I've tried everything, and obviously my way's not working. So when I walk in this building, I'm gonna give you everything I got.
Then 3 months into the program, Maegan received a message from a guest pastor at the facility.
He looked me dead in my eyes and said, I want you to know that the Lord has seen your hurt. He has seen your pain. He has seen your shame. And he wants you to know that you've been made pure. I knew that was a word from the Lord.
Within months, through prayer, Bible reading, and counseling, Maegan was delivered from her 8-year dependence on drugs and men. In that time, she also began living a life fully committed to Jesus Christ. Although drug addiction would eventually claim the lives of both her parents, Maegan began rebuilding the relationships with her 2 children and grandfather.
walking through that program with the staff and the pastor and his wife and his family, I feel like God showed me his love through them.
As for her crimes, Maegan was fined and given 3 years probation. After her probation ended in 2015, she started working as an office administrator and mentor at the Russellville Dream Center, where she continues to work today.
I knew that was my purpose. Is somebody took their time with me to show me things in the Bible, to help me sit down and realize that God is real and God can change you if you let him, and God can make you into somebody else besides that drug addict. So I feel like God healed me from a broken heart, shame, and guilt. If you could have seen who I was back then to who I am now, nobody can say God did not do that. So I look at myself now as redeemed. I feel like I went through everything I went through, the bad, the ugly, the dirty, to come out who I am today, and that's redeemed and forgiven.